Hello. Well, I love old video recorders. The more obscure the better. And so here's an obscure one. It's Technicolor Funai CVC. This was a format that came out in around about 1980. Used these portable video recorders, very often linked to these cameras. And also there were portable-ish showcase machines with a built-in display. And I've got two of those. I'll show you those in a moment. Let's have a quick look at some of the features of this very obscure format that failed miserably. It was only in production for about 2 years. This is much the way the most popular machine. It's model 212. There was a E version here, which is Europe. There's a version without the E, which was NTSC, and there's potentially an unknown model number, which was CCAM for the French market, because I have come across the occasional CCAM tape for this format. Also available was this little tuner that allowed you to record TV programs, but missing from this was any kind of timer, so you couldn't set it to do unattended programs unless you connect this to an external timer. Typically the recorder was connected to this rather heavy power supply, which also handled AV out. So there's a modulator and audio video output connectors on here. And here I have the 212 model, which was NTSC. This is in good working order. Another small portable model was a VP100 from Grundig. Had the same features as this, but they managed to trim a little bit off the size. I've got one, but I can't seem to find it. If and when I do find it, I'll include an image in the description below. So here's the showcase I was talking about with a built-in screen. It comes in this large grey bag. And I have two of these in good working order. This one I'll plug in and demonstrate. I'll first show you around the machine a little bit. So you've got essentially the same mechanism in there as you did on the 212 models, but this is a lot easier to work on. The 212 models are quite hard to dismantle. There's a lot of screws to get to. This one, you take a few screws off around the top and you can take the top off and get good access to the top of the deck at least. It comes with this rather sweet monitor, colour monitor, and speaker. Underneath you'll see this is a power supply. You can remove that and replace it with batteries if you want to use this on the go somewhere. On the side we have camera connector, exactly the same as on the 212 portables. The features here are slightly odd. This is tracking. That's kind of a not variable tracking position, and this is variable tracking position. There's a control here labelled still, and when you flick it to still, it actually allows you to do slow motion on this. And that's for audio dub. We don't want to use that one. External mic, camera socket, mains power in here. And that, I think, is where you can put batteries. But what it lacks is AV output connectors. Well, there are AV output signals on the camera socket because that can drive the monitor on the camera. But if you want to record your signals onto something or display it on a monitor, a bigger monitor, it's a bit inconvenient. So both of my showcase models I've modified slightly to have AV output connectors. That's for connecting to an external charger, one of those packs back there, and these are the controls for the monitor. This is one of the batteries that could be inserted underneath, very heavy lump. Whereas the portable 212 model takes this kind of battery. Right, let's power this up and have a play. This still has a protective film over the top of the cassette carriage. Quick fast forward. Right, let's go into play. And we have fairly good picture and sound. Let's demonstrate those features. This slow motion one, you flick this to still, and then we can use what is the tracking control to speed up and slow down the speed. But there's no reverse search. And that's normal operation again. Rewind. So you say, that's really, very good. That all works quite well. We are getting some dropouts. Now, of course, these tapes are very old, but the format was a bit known for dropouts. It was a bit of a failing. Quite a nice feature of the cassette is that it works like an audio cassette, in that as the space is released by the tape on the supply spool, it's taken up by the tape on the take-up spool. So that allows them to get quite a small cassette for the given running time. This is 30-minute, they did 45 and 1 hour tapes. Now, when you consider this is 1980, a cassette of that size was quite impressive. It didn't hold a candle to Video 8, but for its time, it was a very small cassette. So you'd say this seems like a winner. The machines are quite cute, the tapes are quite cute. What went horribly wrong? Well, they didn't get many people on board. So, okay, we had Technicolor and Funai and Grundig to a smaller extent, but nobody else really supported the format. And what really didn't help was some design faults inside here, which caused the loading mechanism to jam. There was a plastic ring on the loading mechanism, and the plastic would swell up and jam up. And nearly all CVC machines will play up from time to time, and we'll see if we can get this one to do it. It'll probably be fine today, but occasionally, yes, okay, it's working fine today, but occasionally when you hit play, you'll hear it make a whirring noise. And the machine may appear to work, but it's making this loud whirring noise. Of course, it's behaving itself beautifully, but if it does do that, the solution is to go stop play, and it'll usually complete the loading process properly then. Now, since this machine is fairly easy to take apart, I'll take this lid off and we can have a look inside. I'll get you set up so you can look down on the machine. So here we are looking down on the deck. That's the cassette carriage. This is the upper part of the drum. This is the spinning part of the drum. And a particular failure mode, unfortunately, on these is that one or other of the head tips can go open circuit. I believe that only applies to the PAL machines. I may be wrong, but heads going open circuit is a thing, and of course that writes the machine off. Let's demonstrate this machine in action. We do have the normal sort of components we'd expect to find in a video recorder of this age. So tapes coming in here, going past some rollers. Then this is the erase head. It doesn't have a flying erase head. Then past some guides over the head drum. Then up here, I think it goes past the audio control head here, up to the capstan and pinch roller, and then round back to the cassette, which has a normal sort of mechanism for taking up the tape. Let's watch it unlace. From the servicing point of view, what's a bit unfortunate is this whole mechanism here, which is exactly the same as in the 212 models, is mounted on this PCB underneath, which is the same as the 212 models, and it's plugged into it, so you can't operate the mechanism when it's away from the PCB, which can make it rather hard to debug it. Another complication can be that there's a drive belt, there's several drive belts underneath, but one of them is really hard to change due to the way it's been assembled after a drive belt has been installed. This machine, we can see, was built in 1982, so it's probably one of the later models. This is a servo PCB, and there can be problems with this. They sometimes secured the wires with globs of glue, which was hygroscopic, and the glue would start conducting and make a mess of the servo circuits. I'll do some close-up shots of the mechanism for you. Let's again watch it lace up. This big solenoid here actuates the pinch roller. And a closer look at the unlace. With every format, people who know things about video recorders want to know, does fast forward and rewind operate in the laced or unlaced position, or can it vary depending on model? And the answer is always unlaced for this format. So you see the tape is not anywhere near the head drum in fast forward. So the fact that the tape is not laced up during fast forward and rewind may make for a faster winding speed, but it misses out the possibility of doing peep search, which means dropping into the picture as you're fast forwarding or rewinding, which you can do on some Betamax machines and on most Video 8, Hi 8, Mini DV and Micro MV decks. So as well as this showcase machine, I have another one right here, also in its beautiful grey case, also in full working order. This is an NTSC machine, and though this works, it does suffer from the loading problems I've been talking about. So watch what happens when I sec play. Not a lot. I have to give the loading ring a bit of a nudge. But then it does work fine. And similarly, when I hit stop, I have to give it a bit of a help. It's left tape loop as well. And that noise, that's a clue that it's not fully getting to the laced and unlaced position when you hear that whirring noise. But despite all that, when you do get the thing going, this one does actually work fine. And we're getting perfectly good NTSC playback from this machine. This actually has another fault which I've had to work around, in that the tape counter, when it's running over the digits in the tens column, keeps stalling the take-up spool. So I've effectively bypassed the tape counter to stop it from causing problems with it shutting down in the middle of playback. What does help for connecting this NTSC machine up is that the power pack that takes the audio-video connections is actually compatible between NTSC and PAL, so I can run it on normal UK mains, and it handles the AV signal out through the sockets at the back, even though it's the wrong standard for this power supply. Now, I've mentioned that this is not the easiest piece of kit to take apart, so let's demonstrate that. Here, to start with, is the battery, and this one's gone all furry and horrible, so first thing I'm going to do is get that out of the way. That's pretty gross, isn't it? And then we can push this connector down, ready to go down to the bottom of the top lid here. I'll take these the carry strap off. Now, dismantling involves removing these screws, but oddly enough, they're missing already from this particular one. So it's been apart before. I have to take these rear screws out. And you'll find that lots of these screws are different sizes, just to be different. Now we have to take this side panel off. Bottom screws off. Now I can take the top panel off, unplugging this cable as we go. Now, the reason I was taking this side panel off is because to get to the deck, you have to do that to get to the screws underneath, so that we can release this circuit board and separate the two. Let's start by taking these big screws off the bottom. These are the hidden screws that are normally behind this panel. And now we can ease this board off, separating it along the big connectors here. Then you can see what other cables need to unplug. For this one we need to probably take this screening can off. Now we can separate the main PCB off and get to the deck. And you'll immediately see that some of the drive belts have failed. And this one here, which is turned to sticky goo, is particularly difficult because it weaves its way past some mechanism components here. That really has gone quite nasty. So we're going to have to clean up all that goo. So you can see that that belt's a bit of a pain. It travels between the bottom of the motor spindle here, which is shared with the capstan, so it's a capstan motor, and one side comes down to this spool and the other side goes round here over this gear to the other side of this spool. And the problem is this is in the way. So what you have to do kind of is maybe undo this circlip, but you have to get the belt past this plunger which goes through to the other side of the deck and is connected to a spring. So you have to disconnect that spring, try not to lose it, and either feed the belt through there or take this circlip off, pull this away and put the belt through. And in good Blue Peter style, here is one I did earlier. So you can see here that same troublesome belt goes around this capstan motor, past this pulley and then over to here. And also I wanted to point, I've written on here lace and unlace. So these two gears do the lacing and unlacing drive to this loading ring. This is another NTSC deck actually. So I won't do a full restoration on this thing right now, but you can see where that drive belt has to go, and of course the other drive belts will need checking or replacing as well. Reassembly is of course just as difficult as disassembly, with this myriad of different screws, and some have to be put in different sequences, like this one here goes in last after the case is on. It's a horrible thing to work on. Let's have a quick look at some accessories. We've got a CVC head cleaner tape, and you know, I've never worked out how this thing's supposed to work. It's got instructions, but I couldn't make head and tail of it, so that didn't come in much use, that actually, when I tried to use it. But it's got pads that you can replace, and cleaning solution, and instructions which I just couldn't get the hang of. The camera we were looking at just now, this apparently was built by JVC and was apparently one of the reasons that the format failed, because the low light performance on this camera was awful. I tell you, the biggest mistake I've seen is because it's got a black and white viewfinder, people would set the color temperature incorrectly. And I've often seen CVC recordings which are blue because they've been set for indoor lighting when shot outdoors. Operating instructions for this actual machine, the 212E. So it came with the battery, the carry strap we have here, that would be an aerial cable, the big heavy power block, a mains lead for that, a spare fuse, an earphone. Does have a erasure. It does have an erase prevention tab, as most cassettes do. The instructions look quite primitive even for 1980. And there's the tuner, which lacks a timer. In its favour, I will say that the tracking control rarely needs to be used on CVC. The tracking does tend to be central. You can tell this is quite an early instruction set because it says recording time 30 minutes, but later there were 45 and 60-minute tapes. Operating instructions for the camera. That looks like a copy. And interestingly here, price list. So let's see. The Micro Video Showcase, the one we've been looking at, staggering £690 plus VAT. The battery packs alone was £75 plus VAT. Oh, that's interesting. V45E, so it appears here, cassette, 40 minutes approximate. Do you know, I've seen that the tapes pull up short, because normally if you loaded something like a VHS-C was another format that used 45 minutes, they'll actually run for about 46, 47 minutes. But I found that the 45-minute tapes on CVC are short. They tend to be somewhat less than 45 minutes, so that explains it. The head cleaning cassette was £11 something plus VAT. And batteries for the 212 were 30 plus VAT. Quite expensive. The rest of the bump here appears to be for a particular supplier of the equipment, and they did various studio work. And that's a point, actually. There was a studio version of this made, would you believe, where they actually tried to sell this to professional market. So the tape ran faster. It was probably component level recording, but whether any actual machines were sold is another matter. But they did have a go at selling CVC into the professional market. The CVC format that was introduced in 1980, I've not seen any machines built after around about 1982. Maybe it soldiered on a little bit, 83 or 84, but they're all basically of this design. They've all got this problem with the mechanism. Now, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if I could run people's tapes on something more modern. Imagine, for example, that Teac had built an advanced system for use in aircraft, and this has been mentioned on some forums, that they'd made a system that had a recorder in an aircraft, military aircraft, and a mains machine, a rack-mountable deck, which could play the tapes. It's also a recorder, and which overcame all these mechanical problems, had a digital time-base corrector to get rid of any wobble caused by movement of the recorder, better picture processing, and vastly more reliable. I mean, how likely is it that such a system really existed? It sounds like a complete fantasy to me.
Special delivery.
Oh, my goodness. What have you got for me here, Scott? Oh. Thank you, Scott. So this apparently was built in the late 1980s up to around about 1990, long after the original CVC format had been discontinued. Why they chose the CVC format for this aircraft job, we don't know, but we're very grateful for it. What a strange looking piece of equipment. So there we have the front, pull open, that's where the tape goes, somehow. Power switches. Tiny little thing. I don't think that's an actual mains switch. I think that requests the machine to switch off. EMK, it says here. It's got the ability to do markers for particular events, and it can search for markers. Audio dub as well, but it can record as well as all normal deck functions. And picture search. A few scratches on the top. Around the back, quite limited connectors, just audio, video in and out. And a test tone. So it's only mono. The format itself didn't allow for stereo. It's got an elapsed hours meter that's gone all the way off the top. And headphone socket? I don't know. Better check the mains voltage on this one. Does it say 220 to 240 volts, 50 or 60 hertz? so we can run that on normal UK mains. This is apparently a PAL machine, and apparently they did an NTSC one as well. You never would have believed that such a thing could exist for the CVC format. Pull TBC on, alright, and then tracking control. So we'll be using the TBC, I believe, all the time. Let's try it out. In the first instance, let's just power it up and see what we get. That didn't go very well. There was a loud buzz and it popped the fuse in my isolation transformer. Oh, that was a bit disappointing. What went wrong there? Okay, so we had a horrible buzzing noise, and then the 3.15 amp anti-surge fuse on the input side to my isolation transformer went open circuit. Always seems to be, when it gets an overload on my isolation transformer, that the fuse on the input fails. It must be something to do with the way the transformer works. So well, I've replaced that, but I'm not going to power it up until I find out what's happened. It might be that this unit, though it says it's 250 volts, or 240, 250, may have been modified for 110 without me knowing. So let's investigate that. And let's hope, of course, that no further damage has happened in here. There's our big transformer, and look, there's an internal connection there, 110 or 240. Wish I'd known about that earlier. I should have taken the lid off before I powered it up, shouldn't I? Let's check this power supply fuse. Two fuses. Okay, we'll power it up and see what happens. Looks like it survived. We put a tape in. Try rewind. Sounds good. Fast forward. Play. It's got its own speaker. Turn that down. It's a very rough picture. Let's put this tracking control. Full TBC, or pull for TBC on, it says. Let's try that. It seems to be working very badly. Though it might be improving. Maybe just the heads were a bit contaminated. Let's do picture search. And I'll try freeze frame. I think it has one. Slow still. I'm trying to get a feel for whether the heads are worn. I don't believe so. Try the TBC, pull the TBC on. I'm not seeing the TBC doing anything at the moment. It seems to work. I'm not getting a great picture, but that may at least in part be due to that tape. So I think I'll try another tape. But first I need to work out how to get the tape out. like that. I'm sure this won't work, but what happens if we put an NTSC tape in this PAL machine? Well, you get more than I expected actually. You can get the capstan to lock occasionally, and you get something resembling colour, which I find extremely unlikely, but there it is. Looks like they weren't far away from making an NTSC and PAL capable machine. I don't know if this is an NTSC or PAL recording. Right, it's terrible, so it must be NTSC. It keeps going to some sort of false colour with greens and purples everywhere. That's a black and white switch. Colour killer. Colour seems very unstable. It has a control enhancer, which I think is a sort of detail enhancer. And the more you wind it up, the more noise you get on the picture. So I'm getting a generally unstable picture. The colours dropping in and out and going inverted. Now I don't know if you can see it, but there's also squiggly patterns on top of the still image, which means that they must be not on the tape, because those squiggly patterns, if they were on the tape, they would not be moving now, they'd be stationary with the noise that's on the tape. So that must be noise on top of the playback circuits. Though that can occasionally happen and it doesn't really matter. It can be there that it's not really there when the machine's playing. So I'm not going to worry about that in itself too much. I'm more worried about the colour problems at the moment. Well, my impression is that there's something wrong, and it's most likely capacitor troubles. The picture is just generally not stable. So that could be an issue. While we're here though, we're going to have a look at the deck if I can get to it. So let's see what I need to do to access the deck. Looking in here, we can see in a bit more detail. This is a head drum. It's a 4-head drum set, obviously designed for being able to do freeze frame or picture search, and it's built more like a VHS head drum. Furthermore, the loading, I don't know if you can see the loading rings are, the loading mechanism is MRAP, so that's a very sort of VHS style. Looks like they've picked up from VHS here rather than the original CVC way of doing things. And this clearly is the audio control head block. Okay, let's watch it load a tape. It seems that it runs those motors at all times, drum and capstan, which is a bit unfortunate. Is there no way to stop that? I don't know why they think that's a good idea. It isn't. I'll get you able to look down on this deck so you can see it in more detail. Okay, let's switch it on. Fast forward. Don't really see a lot. Play. Here goes. MRAP. I can hear a very slight rumble, which could be the cassette itself, or it could be a head bearing. Let's put it into pause. Oh, it stops. So it's either the cassette itself or capstan bearing, possibly. It's a beautiful mechanism. It's really what CVC should have been like from the start. It's a beautiful mechanism. I suppose the original CVC decks were all very much built to be as compact as possible, and this is a little bit bulkier, so you can kind of see why this sort of mechanism wouldn't have been used on the earlier machines. But it is massively more well built and looks like it's going to be much more reliable than the early CVC machines. We've just got this dreadful playback quality problem. What happens if I operate the open when it's still playing. It's locked, it won't do that. Okay, let's hit stop and then open. What a strange mechanism. Well, I think most of the early stage processing is on this board. So I think the first thing I'll do is maybe see if I can get this board off and test some of the capacitors on there. Or should I see what I can find out with it in situ? So looking at it, the ICs are dated 1989. I've checked some here as well. So that pretty much dates it quite accurately. This doesn't appear to be overly sprinkled in capacitors. From the few I've checked, they seem to be well in spec, but it's very awkward because they didn't screen print the back of the PCB properly, so you can't see where the capacitors come through. You have to try to work out where they are and sort of work out where the traces are, which is really unhelpful. I think we've got the main preamplifier here. You've got things like EE level and deviation, record out, some voltages here, and this board here I believe is the time-based corrector, and that I believe is logic, and that's power, and we've got some other, probably, I don't know, that's probably deck control. There must be audio somewhere. So it's, you know, it's fairly compact actually. There's not that too much in it, but we definitely have a problem. I'll tell you what I'm going to do is check these rails. This is 9.2 volts there. I'm going to check that, see if that's the correct voltage and nice and clean. That 9.2 volt line is reading 8.8. Slightly low. Let's see what it looks like on an oscilloscope. I'm seeing about a little under 200 millivolts peak to peak noise on that, which may be acceptable, but it may be worth seeing if I can clean that up. I've done some more work on this. I have the diagram for the power supply, and I can monitor the 9.2 volts at connectors at the back of this, and it's clean there. My problem was when I was using the oscilloscope earlier, I think that the 9.2 volts I was picking up here, I probably didn't have the correct ground reference level. So, power supply is not the problem. I'm going to do a test recording from a color bar generator onto this machine and see what that looks like. This is playback of the tape that's in there, and the quality seems really rough. Let's stop. Their color bars just been fed in a composite video from this time-based corrector. I'm going to pop a different tape in there and do a recording of that. Right, let's try to do a recording. Nope, that didn't work. Record prevention tab is taken out. It's not something I'm familiar with on CVC format. Let's put some tape over that. Now I press record and the record light comes on. I don't know if you can see that, but the record light's on. So presumably he go record. Oh, it's actually running. You just hit record. Doesn't go record play. Let that run for a while. Okay, let's rewind to the start of that recording and play. Well, it's not defective in that sense. It's not great quality, but for the format it's probably about right. Let's do some picture search and see what we see. When you hit freeze frame you get inverted colour. Yeah, the freeze frame's given a terrible colour. If I go to play, the colour comes back. It seems that when the tracking is off, the colour goes. Just do some basic checks here. I've found the RF output and the head switching signal. This is playing back its own tape. The results are on that monitor, and here on the oscilloscope we can see the head switching signal and the RF signals from the heads. And one of the heads looks to have very slightly higher RF output than the other, but is not massive. I'm not seeing anything terrible with that waveform. It's not as though it's sloping off to one side, which would imply there's some sort of tape path fault. And if I swing the tracking from one end to the other, so that's way off proper tracking, obviously the picture gets terrible and the RF output falls, and do the same the other way. I'm not seeing anything there that says there's anything terribly wrong with the tape path. Okay, well, that's helped a little bit. Actually, I think I'll load my other tape, because this, of course, was made on this machine. I put in a tape from another machine just to do a sanity check. So here we are playing a tape which is a bit chewed up, and you can see how the RF falls, and then when it recovers, we're seeing definitely a bit of a drop at one end of the tape path. Maybe it's the bottom. I think it's the bottom, and I don't think that would improve much with tracking control. Yeah, so the RF seems a little bit weak at the bottom of the picture at the end of the sweep. So that could imply there's maybe a small tape path problem. Maybe I can just clean something up. I'll check that. There is some disturbance at the bottom of the picture, and that would tie up with this drop of RF here. But that's not the fundamental reason that we've got a unstable picture. I don't know if this random tape is in perfect alignment, but I suspect it is. So I've very, very slightly adjusted the exit guide to flatten off the RF signal on the oscilloscope at the end of the sweep. I don't know why it's just shut down. Why has it done that? So it's slightly flattened this area, and now we seem to have a bit of a shutdown problem. Let's just try another tape from another machine. So this is recorded on some other machine, we think. And we've got exactly the same problem as we've seen on all the other tapes, with the colour inverting and the picture being noisy and unstable. So clearly there's a serious problem with this machine. For the time being, I'm going to put this back together. Well, if you were asked who's the one person in the world who could fix this machine, get it up to full working order again, and you said me, please don't have that much faith in me, because I'm not sure about this one. It looks really difficult. I don't know who I would choose. Possibly 12-volt vids, I don't know. Now, a little bit more about the CVC format. One thing that I haven't mentioned so far is the tape width. It's 1/4 inch, and you might think, well, that's an unusual size for videotape. VHS, Beta, V2000, kind of. Loads of other formats, VCR and others, use 1/2 inch tape. But actually there is a quite well-known format that uses a 1/4 inch tape. DV, mini DV, all the professional versions of this use a metal formulation 1/4 inch tape. So although it's the same size, it's a very different tape formulation, and of course a completely different technology. Well, I hope you've enjoyed learning something about the CVC format and this extremely unusual machine. I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.